All right, welcome to episode 73 of the At Bad podcast presented by War Media, where we give you our thoughts on the latest Chicago baseball news as well as take a trip around the league. I am Saul Rodriguez, joined by my co-host Miles Porter, as well as Gabe Wilkins, who you can hear on his State of the Gabe podcast exclusively on Spotify. How we doing, fellas? How we doing, Miles?
Hey, doing good. Played live ABs yesterday. I know we're only in November, but man, you make it to a championship and you're just fired up for the next season. So I'm good. I'm good. Despite the migraine, I'm good. Hanging in there.
Oh yeah, man. And appreciate you for coming on, even with that, Miles. I definitely understand the pain of that. That's wild. So hey, and also when you're talking about baseball, as you said, it's been November. Like we talk about, or it's sad that baseball season's over, but really, I mean, you just really just gotta wait till February in Major League Baseball, at least to know to like have at
Yeah,
least some kind of baseball. It's so.
yeah.
And I will say, and I know Gabe will attest to this. I know Gabe has said this too. Is like still there's still plenty of sports to watch right now, so can't complain too much, especially with football, basketball, in season tournament coming up. I know Gabe, I'm sure, has talked about that in his podcast. So, Gabe, how are you doing? And how's the podcast going, man?
I'm doing well. Podcast going great, man. So far, we 6 episodes in, talking about all the latest and greatest in sports and entertainment. Definitely was talking about that in-season tournament, some NFL action talk, as well as the latest news surrounding James Harden. But it's always a pleasure to be talking baseball with you guys. And even though it's the off season, February will be here before you know it. I believe we about 145 days away from opening day. Man, you know how fast time flies, so it'll be here
Yep.
before you know it.
I know, man. That's yeah. It's one of those things where they every time they the season ends, they have that Steve Carell from The Office thing where he's just like chilling on this on the swing waiting for baseball season. As for real, me waiting because I'm like, damn. But yeah, it'll be here sooner than you expect, and definitely best in my opinion. One of the best times of the year right now with November, December, the holiday season. Gotta enjoy this before we get to like the dog days in January and February, but we'll get to that when we get there. So but we'll start off with Chicago stuff, of course, with the award, offseason officially underway. Award season is here as well. There's a lot to talk about there with the Silver Slugger nominees because the Cubs and White Sox have some, as well as the comeback player of the year. And then after we're done with that, we'll obviously get into the World Series because the Texas Rangers, of course, defeated the Arizona Diamondbacks in a 5-game World Series. So we'll talk about that as well. So we'll start with the Silver Sluggers, of course. Like I was saying, with the Cubs have Dansby Swanson in there, Seiya Suzuki. We'll talk as well about the South Side as well. But Miles, we'll talk Cubs first in this case with the Silver Sluggers. What do you think? What stood out to you when it comes to the Cubs? Were you surprised some guys were on there? For example, for me, not necessarily say I'm surprised that he was on there, but Dansby Swanson, I feel like if he wasn't on the list, I wouldn't be disappointed. But he did, compared to some of the other shortstop, have a big year, 20 home runs, 20 plus home runs, or whatever, which is like his benchmark. He does that. He's been doing that a few years now. But what did you think about the nominees and what this means to Cubs baseball, man?
Oh, dude. I mean, the future is bright over here on the north side. It's exciting um, even when you look at Dansby Swanson and offensively, it was definitely a solid year, but definitely a year where we could have improved in a few areas. Um, I think I am a little shocked myself to see him on there. It's cool to see Seiya on there after
Mm-hmm.
missing about a month in the beginning
Yeah.
and then really struggling and getting and kind of getting benched in a sense during the season and then earning his playing time back. That's awesome. That's a cool underrated story that I think that is going to come out of the 2023 season. And then I mean Belly, man. I mean, everything kind of speaks for itself when it comes to that aspect. So I'm proud of all these guys. Super proud of that Cubs team in general in 2023. As much as our hearts were broken at one point, super proud of that ball club, and it's cool seeing our guys up there. And if we don't have Belly back, maybe we'll have Juan Soto, but that is for a later conversation. Gabe, take it away.
Yeah. No, wait, real quick. I was just gonna say on the what you said about Bellinger's. You're right. I feel like he's everywhere now. Like seeing all the awards coming
Mm-hmm.
out, kind of puts into perspective how good of a season he had. But yeah, in the AL, and Gabe, you could just talk. On the Cubs point as well, but on the White Sox side of things, of course, Luis Robert. I mean, what haven't we said about Luis Robert? This is deserved. Him being nominated in there. So what did you think about him being included in there, as well as just Chicago being well represented in this category?
was for the Cubs. I mean, they're very well represented.
Mhm.
Anytime you have 3 guys nominated for Silver Slugger awards at their respective positions, you would take that. I don't think Dansby Swanson will end up taking it home. I mean, he has some tough competition to go up against with Trey Turner,
Mhm.
Frankie Lindor, who had a 30-30 season in New York. You know, that holds weight. So I'm curious to see how that'll shake out. Bellinger, I expected to be in the running. He had a hell of a phenomenal comeback player of the year campaign, which, as we know, the Players Association awarded him yesterday. So it was only a matter of time before you saw announcements for him. As far as Luis Robert Jr. is concerned, I'm not surprised at all. This is what I came to expect. You could kind of see it coming as far as like May, in the month of May, when he really started to heat up around Mother's Day weekend, and then he parlayed that into a phenomenal close to the month of June. And it got to a point where you started paying attention to the home run numbers. And I think his numbers could have been even greater if he had men on base in front of him to drive in, because he did the majority of his damage when he was hitting for power off of solo shots. So I'm not surprised to see that Luis Robert Jr. is being nominated for a Silver Slugger Award. It would be kind of cool. I believe he would be the first White Sox player since Eloy Jimenez and Tim Anderson in 2020 to win one. So to do that and to do it in a full season, not taking away from what Eloy and TA did, is something that you just really gotta expect, or like respect. And I expect him to be in the running for more Silver Slugger awards in the years to come, as long as he remains healthy.
Yeah, and he's actually part of that 12 player group that is nominated for a Gold Glove and a Silver Slugger, which is crazy to me to see 12 dudes in there. I mean, that's awesome because I mean those are guys that are as elite as it gets on both sides of the ball. So I mean, it's awesome to see a guy like Luis Robert get recognized like that. Especially in a season like the White Sox had, you know, there was always that's the thing about love about baseball. And I've said it before, where like no matter how bad a season is for certain teams, like there's always some positive to look at. It's never completely dark. Some teams may have had that, but I mean, at least I've always recognized that with the Cubs or the White Sox. So and especially Chicago sports, there's always something at least to watch out. So that's a good thing about these types of awards that recognize those guys. On the comeback player of the year side, it was all Chicago. It was Cody Bellinger for the Cubs that has won it, and Liam Hendricks of the White Sox who won it for the American League. So that was pretty cool. What are your thoughts on that, Gabe? And just the fact that Liam, obviously, with after facing his battle with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, he comes back. And it doesn't matter what the numbers, because it's one of those things. Comeback player of the year. It doesn't matter what the numbers say. It's like you came back, and especially a guy like that coming back from a cancer battle. Like, dude, I don't care what you do, as long as you get back on the field, that's a comeback story in itself. So, a guy like Cody Bellinger, of course, had a few seasons where he was down and out, and just couldn't find it in LA, leaves LA, and it comes to the Cubs, and he's got 881 OPS. It's his highest mark since his MVP season. A lot of his numbers actually were pretty similar to his MVP season in 2019. So that was cool to see. And like Miles said, even if he doesn't come back, it was if we have Juan Soto, I don't think I'm going to be complaining anytime soon. So we'll see what happens. But Gabe, what were your thoughts on the comeback player of the year award?
Well, as far as things are concerned, first, on the South Side, I don't think it could have went to a better human being and a better man than Liam Hendricks. That's a guy that I've gotten to know a lot, pretty well, over the last few seasons, man. And he's been one of the most utmost standing citizens I've ever seen. Like, dude, always showing love to the fans when he's on his way to the bullpen with his coffee. Intense competitor, and a guy that really laid it all out on the line for a White Sox ball club that was in need of some leadership. And even in spite of them still being in need of leadership, he's always been one of the ultimate leaders in the clubhouse, and a well-respected guy, and a guy that's done so much, not only on the field when healthy, as far as shutting games down whenever the White Sox have a lead in the top or bottom of the ninth with the final 3 outs left remaining. He's done a lot in the community. And I think you tie all that together and combine that with what he had to overcome, not only with the shoulder issues that he's been pitching through over the last couple years. Very rarely do you ever hear him complain about that. But overcoming non-Hodgkin's lymphoma to do it. I was at his first game when he came back against the Angels on Memorial Day. And that was a special scene and a sight to behold, man, because you could tell, even though he wasn't in that tip-top dominant form that we become accustomed to seeing him in the last 4 to 5 years, he was pushing through it with the help of the crowd. And he was fueling off of it, man. So I'm damn proud of Liam Hendriks. And while I don't know what the future holds for him with his option on the table, whether he comes back or not, he'll always be a guy that's admired and well respected by White Sox fans like myself and true White Sox fans that are there day in and day out to see the team. As far as Cody Bellinger, got to give him his salute. Dude revamped his swing, went to work in the lab, and got back active with it and committed himself to the craft and reaped the dividends off of an incredible year that he had on the north side. And while, I know a lot of Cub fans are anxious to see what happens with him, hey, you got your money's worth with Cody Bellinger, and it was a 1-year deal that proved to be worth the price and some 4 years. He helped contribute not only to a winning ball club, but had you in the thick of things into the end.
Yeah, exactly. And to go back on what you said about Liam Hendriks, it's crazy just to see, like, even having the whole thing with Olner as well in August. And then also he was also a nominee for the Roberto Clemente Award, who was, of course, was won by Aaron Judge.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, he did a bunch of stuff that it was just like, it was awesome to see, and just like I said, him getting it back on the field was a win in itself. So it's cool that he was recognized. And as you mentioned with Cody Bellinger, yeah, like, I mean, that it was definitely disappointing that he wasn't able to play in the postseason with how good that he played here. But yeah, it was definitely, he was definitely well worth every penny that the Cubs paid him there for this season. And we'll see what happens with these two guys, because like you said, we don't know where they're going to be. So, Miles, what did you think about overall these two guys that well deservedly got this comeback player of the year award?
Oh my gosh! I mean, just hard work and determination, and for someone who's been personally affected by cancer, and then this Liam Hendriks story really hits home for me. So seeing him come back out there on the mound and talk about his debut this year, going back to what Gabe said, that's awesome. That was one of the most heartfelt moments for me throughout this entire season. And then and when I look at Cody, it's just, man, just going to work in the off season. That's what the off season is for. That's what we're all using it for. It's the things that we, maybe have been struggling with over the years or the past season or whatever it may be. This is the time to correct certain things or revamp or reinvent ourselves a little bit as players and hitters or whatever the case may be. It's incredible. And I hope that there are young players out there who kind of look at Cody Bellinger's story, um, take notes and get inspired from it, because this is really someone who I'm not going to sit here and say that Bellinger could not have another bad year, but this was a year where it was kind of like, all right, well, we'll see what the future holds for you. But if you struggle again, maybe we're not going to give you exactly what you desire. And this year, he earned it with how well he played on the Cubs. So I couldn't be more proud of Belly. I've always been a big Cody Bellinger fan since before Belly versus Gelly. So it's incredible. I think we got some great representation in Chicago for many different reasons. I'm hoping a lot of young people are looking at both of these stories and are inspired in some sort of way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the best part of this whole thing is that it's not even baseball related for the most part. It's just guys that came back, had success in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's what was good to see. Moving on from Chicago's awards to just new guys getting jobs with the Chicago White Sox. Paul Janisch, former Major League infielder, was hired as the new director of player development for the Sox. Gabe, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, this is a guy that I told you, before coming on, I was like, man, I had forgotten about this guy. He played some years with the Braves, the Reds, the Orioles. So, and he was a good utility player. So, what are your thoughts on him joining? I mean, you also mentioned before we came on the trend that of these former players that Chris Getz is getting. So, what are your overall thoughts on this acquisition and what this means for player development for the Sox?
Well, it's an intriguing acquisition. It's intriguing in the sense that this is Paul Janisch's first time working in the MLB front office. However, I approach it with cautious optimism, because I like the fact that he's a former player. I like the fact that he comes from a program in Rice in Houston, Texas, which has been a well-regarded national powerhouse program over the last quarter century or so. And even though that team wasn't as successful under his watch, he was an assistant coach. And his job with the White Sox would be, as you alluded to, directing player development. I'm just curious to see how players in the minor league system for the White Sox and even at the big league club seek to make strides and improve from a fundamentally sound standpoint under Paul Giannis's watch. The one thing that I'm interested in, and I do like about what Chris Getz has done, is that he's brought in former MLB players such as Brian Bannister to run the pitching department. Josh Barfield is his assistant general manager, and now Paul Giannis to serve as the director of player development in the role that Getz once served in. I like the fact that he's brought in former players who have a background when it comes to coaching and teaching players how to be pros in this league. And I think that's a great thing. I'm just curious to see what moves are made over the next several days and beyond. We got Tim Anderson out here who is waiting to see whether or not his $14 million option is going to be picked up come Monday. So it's so many big decisions, but the hiring of Paul Giannis, I approach it with cautious optimism, and I would advise other White Sox fans to do so as well. As far as his ties to Getz or whatever, I'm not sure fully as to what that is, even though I know he has ties with Brian Bannister, his teammates in KC. But let's just see what happens.
Yeah, no, and I think is to talk about how other former players that have been in there. It kind of reminded me of the Craig Breslow situation in Boston, and how he's their new president of baseball ops. And he had during his press conference that he was like, I know you probably you see I'm gonna paraphrase, but he said, I know you've seen like you see an analytical nerd up here, like all this stuff about stats and all that, but I also played the game and I've also won the World Series. I know what it takes to win. Like he's played 13 seasons in the big league, so it was cool to see that because like as much as I understand why there are people in the front office that had never played before that could still have success because we've seen that. It is cool also to see a guy like Craig Breslow who's not part of necessarily the modern game and to embrace the modern game and to kind of have a little bit of both. And so there's I like to see that. But Miles, I wanted to pose this question to you as a player. What do you think like a former Major League Baseball player brings to say like a front office? Like to some it may be self-explanatory. They've had experience and all that, but like in your eyes, how much can that help a franchise? Kind of get to where they want to be with when it comes to like the players they have, players they're gonna get.
I think it definitely plays a very significant role because you are able to kind of put yourself in the player's shoes for the most part and understand the different emotions and what works well for certain players and what doesn't because you've been in these scenarios. You've been to where they've been. I think it's huge. I think it's huge because now you're able to really relate to the players because you are still, you're in a manager role now. Now you're overseeing everything, but you're also able to relate to them because you were them. You were that player.
Mm-hmm.
You understand everything that's going through their heads and through the manager's heads. I like that a lot. I like it a lot because I think if you get the right guy for a role like this, and he's able to kind of embrace this newer, younger generation of baseball on top of being a former pro guy himself, that can take a franchise a very long way because now you can get the players to buy in, you can get the fans to buy in, and it kind of creates a more cohesive franchise. So I'm a huge fan of that. And I know that there are a lot of GMs out there who didn't play pro baseball, kind of like you talked about, and they know their stuff. Like we have the Theo Epsteins out there and many other guys who we can name. But I do like a lot of these former pro guys who played in the big leagues, now looking over guys who are currently in the big leagues. I think it's huge. I love every part of it.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's it's definitely something, that I think is undervalued in the sense of from the public opinion, like, from the court of public opinion. I feel like people are always like, "Oh, like, it doesn't really matter, like, who's this and that," but I think it definitely plays a part, especially former players. I think, they definitely value certain things, and, I think as Gabe said, take it, he's cautiously optimistic. That's fair because I mean, especially anything the
Yeah.
White Sox do or anything your favorite team does, you can't if you're not fully all in on it, definitely you got to be a little cautious on that for sure.
One thing that they said though in their press conference that they had with the media through Zoom that was reported through various plugs and hubs on Twitter is that they're stressing a very big emphasis on defense and doing whatever it takes to improve it. And I know, as well as you guys know, if you've been watching White Sox baseball over the last few years, defense has been one of the most glaring issues with this ball club. I'm curious to see what that means for guys that have had defensive struggles over the years, such as Tim Anderson, as well as a few other players whose spots on this roster, not only in 2024, but moving forward into the rest of this decade, are in question. So like I like that. I also like that what I'm hearing from guys like Josh Barfield about how they want guys that are grinders, guys that are gonna work counts, work ABs. That was one of my biggest issues watching this ball club the last couple of years following their success in 2021 when they won the Central. So let's make sure if we're gonna evaluate this game as fans that we paying attention to the nooks and crannies of things and not just getting so fascinated with things to the point where we just look at guys by name and say, oh, that's what we need. Let's just throw everything at them. Let's give them some time. I understand the frustration. I'm a fan that's frustrated as well. But hey, if you ain't got no solutions, then you part of the problem too. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, you're right. I think, especially, as you mentioned, that the White Sox are trying to prioritize defense. I mean, we've seen even on the north side how much of an impact that is when it comes to, Dansby Swanson, Nico Horner up the middle, Bellinger at first base or center field.
They got a
Um,
lot of runs,
yeah,
a lot of
exactly.
Yeah.
runs
So
this year. Yeah.
seeing how important that is, I mean, we saw, I mean, hell, some of the teams that were in the postseason, their defense was great. I mean, you look at just the Minnesota Twins, how they played in their short time in the postseason. Like
Yep.
guys were just all over the field. Correa showing up, even though he didn't have a great season offensively. He shows up no matter what when it is. So
Take more than
it very
offense.
exactly. So it's definitely important on that side of the ball as much as anything. So hopefully the White Sox are able to get some good guys up there because there's definitely plenty of guys available. They're able to help you on both sides of the ball. So they complement a guy like Luis Robert in center. But definitely the one main story in baseball right now, of course, is the World Series that just ended on Wednesday. Like I said, the Texas Rangers have won their first World Series in their 63-year history. They beat the Arizona Diamondbacks 4-1. And you know what? We want, me, Miles, Mike, we wanted that 6-game, even 7-game, like series, but it just wasn't meant to be. The Texas Rangers just outclassed the Diamondbacks for the most part. I mean, the Diamondbacks played a couple games. Obviously, they won one, and a couple of the games were close, but I mean, 5-0 that last one, 11-7, which that game was, I mean, that was 11-3 for a while, 11-1 for a while. So it just, the Texas Rangers showed up and they did what they had to do all postseason long, man. Like I said, going into it, I was like, man, I doubted them every series. I was like, maybe this is it, where they lose. Maybe this is when they lose. And this was the first time in all postseason where I was like, they're probably going to win this. But I think the Diamondbacks will make it tough on them. And to be honest, they didn't really do much except for that one game and just keeping another game close. But we'll start with you, Miles. What were your overall thoughts and just the Texas Rangers winning their first World Series, man?
That's awesome. That's awesome for Texas, and that's gonna be a big old party because, as we all knew, they do things. As we all know, they do things very big in Texas. That's great, and I think with the Diamondbacks, there was a lot of heart. There's a lot of heart and a lot of talent on this ball club, and it's so I hope Diamondback fans are holding their heads high, because the fact of the matter is that this is one of the last teams that I or most fans expected to be here in this moment. Um, the Rangers also had heart, but I think that they had a little bit more experience as well. I also feel that with when I look at that Texas Rangers roster, they didn't completely buy their way to this World Series, in my opinion. But I think that they spent money correctly to get to this point. I feel like there's a good mesh of young, homegrown players on the Rangers, and a good mix of, hey, we signed these guys to help develop these younger guys, and they're going to add to what we're building towards. I think the Rangers really did it right. And we're seeing the result of that, and I don't expect to see them anywhere else next year, other than being right up there with the Astros and the Mariners and whoever else is in their way. I expect the Rangers to be good for a long time. Reminds you of the Braves just a little bit. So, yeah, I expected the Rangers to win, but this is cool. This is cool for Texas, and I hope D-backs fans are holding their heads high.
Yeah, and you talk about the Rangers being back there. I saw a couple. I think it might have been DraftKings, or I don't know who it was, that like they had like the favorites for next year, and the Braves are number one, rightfully so. I understand they have a great roster, going to have another great roster again next year, but the Rangers weren't even in the top 10, so I was kind of surprised there, because I'm
Yeah.
like, for the most, I mean, Degrom is going to be back. I don't remember exactly when he's going to be back, but he will pitch for the most part. And I mean, Eovaldi's still there. Like they have they have some young guys. I mean, Adolis obviously. So kind of strange that they weren't much higher, but at the end of the day, I'm sure they don't care, because like a lot of people counted them out, going into the season, except for our boy Gabe, who of course hit me up. He's like, hey, Gabe has gotten a lot of things right, which I'm not surprised at all. And he's been behind the Rangers way longer. You and a buddy of mine, the one that you met at a Sox game before, my boy Mario, that they have been on the Rangers all year long. And like I said, I'll own it. I was downing them for a lot of the times, because I was like, I don't know if their pitch is going to hold up, but they showed up, especially when they got Jordan Montgomery. And hell, even without Adolis and without Max Scherzer those last couple of games, they still were able to, put Jankowski out there, and he got big hits. And yeah, they just got it done. So how do you feel about this World Series, Gabe?
I was looking forward to this Ranger season. I really was from the get-go. I knew that they were going to be a threat to the Astros. But when you run the table on the road the way that they did, that was an incredible run to watch and witness. And to do that on the way, or fresh after rather, the regular season, in which you lost the division title on the last day of the regular season at the hand of the Seattle Mariners, man, that's impressive. That's impressive. And everything that you thought could go wrong, they found a way to weather the storm. Getting a 2-0 series lead against Houston, losing 3 at the crib, no problem. Close game in late innings, game 6, backs against the wall, even though you got a 3-run lead. Adolis Garcia nails it with the kiss of death, grand slam. Comes back the next night, runs the table with a multi-home run performance, and then adds on to that with a walk-off home run in game 1 of the World Series. And if, as much as I know he wouldn't have been in that position in game 1 if not for the game-tying home run that Corey Seager had, the run that this man went on was incredible. And it sucked to not see him be able to finish it out. But boy, did the Rangers pick him up in a valiant way. You bring up Travis Janikowski coming through with 2 RBIs in game 4, and you could tell that they took that go and take it motto to heart, man. And they went out and took it. And I got to give a kudos to Texas in the way that they did it. And I agree with you, Miles. Everybody talks about the money that they spent to solidify the middle infield with Marcus Semien and Corey Seager, who did deliver when money time came and it mattered the most. However, as you alluded to, Miles, they have great homegrown talent. Evan Carter came up big throughout the postseason many times with his play defensively and at the plate. You talk about Travis Janikowski. They had other guys like Jonah Heim come through in some key stretches, here and there. I really like what this ball club is built. And mind you, Wyatt Langford is coming, ladies and gentlemen. So they have a lot of talent. And they also went out and made moves at the deadline when it mattered the most to solidify the pitching staff. No DeGrom, no problem. We're going to get Jordan Montgomery. We give up one of our top prospects to do that. We're going to get Max Scherzer. We gave up Luis Angel Acuna, Ronald's younger brother, to make that happen. I love what Texas is doing, and I think they're going to be in the thick of things next year. With that said, though, if you're an Arizona Diamondbacks fan, you have nothing to do but be proud of the run that this team made. That they were a team that was on the rise, but man, they are far ahead of schedule. And if I'm a Toronto Blue Jays fan and I'm watching Gabby Moreno doing what he's doing, and I see Corbin Carroll and those young boys, man, I'm like, hey, we kind of help aid to that. But it was a hell of a series and a hell of a season for a Texas Rangers team that came and saw and conquered, and through all the adversity they went through, they found a way to withstand it. And I have to give credit to Bruce Bochy for helping them do that. A proven manager, been there, done that, won at every stop along the way. It goes to show you how important not only having star talent is with young players, but also great leadership.
Yeah, 100%, man. I think, and I think I've said this before too. Like when it comes to playoff baseball, like I'm all over these press conferences. I watch I watch every single press conference known to man that comes
That's
out
how
in
you learn.
October. Yeah, and like I just love watching Bruce Bochy's, and I love watching Torey Lovello's. And I'll say a couple more things about the Rangers before we talk about the Diamondbacks. I did want to talk about them, but with Corey Seager, and I mean that dude, all he did was rake. I mean, it's just nasty when you look at these numbers. I mean, he had 66 at bats in the postseason, and he had an 1133 OPS. I mean, that's just nasty. You talk about one of the other guys I wanted to mention as well. As you mentioned, Gabe, Evan Carter. I mean, it just makes no sense that this dude like has never been here before, and he looks like a 10-year vet, and he looks like he's been there before and like doesn't even care. This guy had all he did was rake too. By the way, he came up the season and he had a 1058 OPS going into October, and then in October he had a 917 OPS. So that dude was just raking all postseason long. Two of the main guys that kind of helped the Rangers win. I will say too, when it comes to the pitching side, give you a lot of credit too as well to John Gray. I mean, the pitching performances he had in the World Series, I thought were awesome. And from a guy who's really come a long way from being in Colorado, thought to be the ace at one point in Colorado, going to Texas, and having this success, being able to win a World Series ring, even though it wasn't a perfect year. Bochy said that himself in one of the press conferences, that John Gray is still a guy that can go out there any given day and shove, and he did that in the World Series. So it's one of those things. It was great stories all around. I mean, Nathaniel Lowe, who's his mom is battling cancer right now. I mean, seeing that story and seeing how every time they had him on that Fox Sports stage, had a message to his mom. So that was awesome to see, and there's just so many good stories. But I will say that I will say this too, that the Diamondbacks, nothing short of awesome stories. I mean, all down the line, as you mentioned. Gabe, go ahead, Gabe. You want to say something?
Yeah, and I got to give a shout out to my man Marcus Semien.
Oh yeah, former Sox great,
right? Former White Sox player. Who I miss dearly, but I'm not gonna be a bitter fan about that, man. I was very happy to see him hit that home run in the top of the ninth, which was a 3-run home, I believe, to make it a 5-0 lead, and pretty much nailed it in the coffin for him as far as winning. I'm damn proud of Marcus Semien, a guy who had some great years in Oakland, went to Toronto, gambled on himself, and it paid off for him, and now it's netted him a World Series ring, and he's been the definition of not only consistency but reliability. I don't think he missed a single game this season. He played in every single game. We have to tip our hat to guys like that, man, in this day and age, regardless of what sport it's in, because you don't see that every day. And kudos to Marcus, and I wish him nothing but the best of success, as well as Dane Dunning, who stepped up as a member of that bullpen and served as a spot starter on occasion throughout the season in Texas. A guy that I wish those guys nothing but the best. It's a business, and I wish more fans understood that.
Yeah, 100%. I think, Marcus Semien's another guy. Like I said, man, we can just keep going with these dudes. I mean, they have so many cool stories. I mean, yeah, well, Marcus Semien, what he went through, as you said, betting himself, playing in Oakland and all that, and just I won't lie again. I was one of those guys that when I saw them sign Corey Seager and Marcus Simeon, I was like, what exactly are we doing here? Like, I don't necessarily understand what is going on here in Texas, but hey, at the same time, you gotta get those guys no matter what everyone else says. You got to start from somewhere. Even Corey Seager, they kept asking him like, what did he think when they signed him? Did he believe in the process? And he said, yeah, they fully convinced him. We're gonna get pitching. We're gonna do this and that. They went out there and got pitching. Valdi, they traded for Montgomery. DeGrom obviously didn't pitch this year, but they got him. They traded for Max Scherzer, even though he didn't have a lot of success in October. But it just goes to show that you really put an effort, and it's like it's like Miles said, they didn't necessarily buy this World Series, but the thing is that they maneuvered their way. They put effort in getting guys, which to be fair, not a lot of teams do, and not even do, but do it right. And these guys did it, to a T, and they got what they wanted because I literally, like I said, counted them out, and they were able to show up every time, and it's cool to see guys like Adolis Garcia, as we've talked about before, traded away from the Cardinals, and showing up there, and as well as hell, even like Jordan Montgomery, we saw his struggles as well. We've seen his struggles before, even with whether it be with the Yankees or whether it be with the Cardinals, and he showed up in this postseason. He had like literally earned his money, like that. Whatever he gets paid, yeah, he's gonna get paid, and I think he's gonna get a lot more just because of those few weeks in October. Because man, he killed it, and it was all ace stuff right there. So cool to see, as well as another thing too. Corey Seager was the World Series MVP. I think they said he's one of 4 that has won it twice. And I think it was, there was something, I'm blanking on the one with something that only Reggie Jackson did, which I think
he's the second. He's the second positional player.
Oh yeah,
to ever win the World Series twice, joining Reggie Jackson. And he's the only player to win World Series MVP in both the leagues. American League and National League, respectively. So he has had a majestic and historic postseason run that will more than likely put him up there with the all-time greats. And to do that in both leagues, that's some gangster shit. I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah, and that's one other thing too. I love to see that because Corey Seager had some injury-riddled seasons, and people talked about, is this guy for real? Is he ever gonna meet his expectations? I mean, he's done that and more now at this point, right? I mean, he's had great seasons, he's had all-star seasons, and he just obviously put on a show in October and put the team on his back, especially when Adolis went down. I mean, even Torey Lovullo was talking about regretting pitching to him in I believe it was Game 4. So it's like, it really just goes to show the types of guys, the types of players these are. And as well, another guy I wanted to mention as well, Mike Maddox. He won his first World Series. A guy who's been in he's been in the game for forever. Like literally, I think they said it was because I believe he's the same age as the Rangers. So he's been in the game for a long time. And it's cool to see a guy like him. He was getting emotional. They asked him on the field, they're like, how does it feel? Whatever. And he was getting emotional. It's cool to see guys like that finally get their flowers, and some of the things I wanted to mention with the Diamondbacks, as you guys have talked about as well, they should have their heads held high. They won, a couple more games than, like I said, a couple more games of the Cubs, a couple more games of the Yankees, 2 teams that, a lot of people were like, like they're not going to make the postseason. Like the Diamondbacks are better. They showed up. They proved why they're like a 90-win team, right? They're like, they played like a 100-win team, like in October. So the Diamondbacks have nothing to be ashamed of. They play their hearts out. Zach Gallen pitched his heart out in Game 5. It's just the offense just couldn't solve the Rangers pitching. That's not even a bad thing. I mean, a lot of teams couldn't solve that pitching. So, and another thing too, I will say is that really cool to see Torey Lovullo kind of wears emotions on his sleeve, especially in that last press conference, because you could tell how much he felt that loss. And he said, I think he said something like he wanted to just curl up, go to like middle of nowhere and just curl up and feel it for a few days. But it's hey, I'm sure he feels that way, and I'm sure that a lot of managers feel that way, but they won't say it. But it's cool to see him being honest, and just, you could tell he's also a great mixture of the old and the new, because they made some questionable decisions in October that you could attest to, that, or you can relate to analytics and all that stuff. But he owned up to it and he said, "Hey, if it worked, everyone's going to cheer it. If it didn't work, then obviously there's going to be a lot of controversy. So you got to take the gamble." But yeah, I became a real big Torey Lovello fan, I think, this October. And I think that the Diamondbacks are going to be, back in the postseason next year. And no one's going to be surprised because they're built for it. They got Corbin Carroll out there, Ketel Marte, who's the hit in every game. I believe he got a hit in, or he got on base in every single game, which is
longest
just
postseason hit streak in MLB history. 20 games consecutively. He's hit safely, man. That's insane. And that was a reason why I really wanted Ketel Marte on the South Side. He was one of them guys when they were struggling. I was like, man, I would love to get a guy like Ketel Marte, but a lot of people weren't willing to take that risk on him because he was a guy that struggled with his health, and he showed when healthy just how vital of a player he is. People forget he was an all-star a few years ago. Torey Lovello was a guy that many people in Arizona wanted fired 2 seasons ago when they lost 100+ games. Now look at what Torey Lovello has done. A hell of a job, man. And I feel his pain on that because baseball is a long season, and you don't know when you're going to get these chances again, if ever. And when you lose the way that they did, even though you have nothing to hang your head low about, it stings, and it's going to sit with those guys all winter long. And I'm pretty sure it's going to serve as the motivational factor for them when it's time to go back to work to spring training to see how can we get to another.
Exactly. And I think that's what, he said it too when they asked him. They're like, well, what do he say to the fans? And he's like, "I'm sorry I didn't do my job." And it's like, yeah, it must suck because, as much as like, you'll probably reflect on it a couple of months from now and be like, "Hey, well, we did that as a success." It sucks in the moment, I'm sure. And to see, the other side, but man, they killed it. And I think, they deserve all the flowers they get and definitely are going to come back next year. But Miles, what did you think about the type of development the Diamondbacks went through and what they could do for, say, some of the teams for next year? Like, seeing a Diamondbacks team, Gabe kind of alluded to it with the Blue Jays, but a team like, hey, like right here in the city of Chicago with the Cubs and even the White Sox. Like, I don't care what anybody says. This game of baseball is crazy and nobody guessed the Diamondbacks are going to be in the World Series. So if somebody's out there saying, "Hey, the White Sox are making the World Series next year," like, don't laugh at them because literally anything can happen. And like, what kind of optimism could this give a team like, hey, like the Cubs are like, "Hey, we finished a couple games behind them. We could have easily been there." Like, how does it help a team that that's on the verge?
I mean, I think you kind of said it. Anything can happen. Maybe some teams are a move away. Whether that means adding or subtracting, it depends on the team, right? I think, yeah, I think a lot. One of the cool things about this season overall is that we're seeing a lot. We saw some teams emerge that we did not expect to emerge the way they did, and I think that's kind of going to attest to what I was saying earlier, where it's a lot of these teams aren't exactly buying everything, and specifically when you look at a team like the Diamondbacks, that's a very young baseball team. You look at Alec Thomas, who's 23, Corbin Carroll's 23, Geraldo Perdomo, 24. This is a very young ball club, and so, hey, if you got the young pieces around you that are bought in, and believe in the manager and believe in the franchise and the system that they're playing under, some of these ball clubs might just be a move or two away. I think it really comes down to how comfortable are the players on this franchise. What are their relationships with each other? There's so many different things that play into it, but I think it's cool. That's one of my favorite things about baseball is like, you can't predict this shit, man. This isn't like any other sport. You can't. You just can't. And I think that's amazing. So many teams may be closer than they really realize, and maybe they're a move away. So I hope certain ball clubs are looking at this, thinking to themselves, well, maybe we're not as behind schedule as we think we are, and we can compete next year. So I think it also makes for better baseball. If a franchise is if they want to be competitive, then they're going to show that they want to be competitive. They're going to make the moves. They're going to light the fire under the players' asses in between games to go out there and compete. So I love it. I hope other teams are looking at this thinking to themselves, Okay, the Diamondbacks got the World Series, but we won 80, 85 plus games, almost 90 games. So yeah, I love it. And I'm specifically talking the Cubs right now. We're right there. We're right there. I still think we're a few moves away, but maybe we're not at the same time. So, it makes me excited for next year and just the future of baseball in general. Yankees, take note. Can't buy everything you want. So that's all.
Yeah,
San
exactly.
Diego too.
100%.
San Diego too, and the Mets, because let's be real, the Yankees, these ain't George Steinbrenner's Yankees. Hal spins, but Hal is more of a economist when he comes. He's calculated with how he spends compared to his dad. But like, there were so many teams that thought that they could buy their way to a championship and they couldn't. And that's what I hope fans take away from this Texas Rangers team. Yes, they spent money, but damn it, they have a great farm system. And that farm system and playing your young guys, that's the number one takeaway that I take from this whole 2023 MLB season. We saw it in Cincinnati. That team could easily be a couple pieces away in the NL Central of knocking on the door of competing for a couple of pennants. The Baltimore Orioles, like, spend the money. And when it's time to strike and you have a great team, make the moves necessary that you can to ensure that your fan base has a great chance, if not a higher probability, of seeing a fall classic come into their town come October, man, because you only get one shot of these every so often. Everybody ain't the Houston Astros. Everybody ain't the Atlanta Braves. And you have to believe as a fan. And I take a lot from both of these sides as a White Sox fan, man, because even though I understand the fight that Chris Getz is going to have with ownership, no differently than other GMs of past under the Jerry Reinsdorf tenure, you never know, man. It's not always about who spends the most money. It's about who makes the smartest moves. And winning changes everything, from the way the fans see the club to the way that players see themselves.
Yep, exactly. And I think, fans see that too. Like, it's one of those things that I've been hearing all October long. Like, this is what happens when your front office puts some effort in and gets the right players. And it's a blueprint some teams could follow, and nobody's gonna get it perfect. But the Rangers are a team. Same with the Diamondbacks when it comes to drafting, when it comes to getting guys, and just how Gabe said it too. The Rangers have a great farm system, and I mean, we've seen it with the guys that they've developed. So those guys help them win the World Series. So I think it's a good sign. I think that despite what everybody was saying about this World Series, that that it was like, I think it had 3 of the least watched World Series games in history. All that stuff, like, still good for baseball because of the teams that were in it, how they were built, and just the organizations. At the end of the day, not every World Series is going to have New York, LA, Boston. You can't get that every year, and I think that's a testament to baseball and how great the game is, because the randomness, I think, is still pretty cool. And I think even next year it's up for grabs for who wants the World Series. Like, Houston is going to be competing for it. Texas is going to be back up there, so it could go either way, and I think that's probably what makes it most exciting.
And what's fascinating? The third wild card team has represented the National League 2 years in a row since they changed this format. All you got to do is just get in.
Mm-hmm.
You never know, especially with that wild card round, what can happen.
Wild card teams.
And I've always been a fan of the wild card because it brings fans, or it keeps fans into the seats. There was a time where our grandfathers was watching baseball like mine in the 60s, watching White Sox teams win 90 games, but they couldn't get into the playoffs because the Yankees were too damn good. Like, hey, all you got to do is just get in and you can have a shot. I mean, I know you Cub fans know very well. Did you think that Phillies team a season ago was going to the World Series when you swept them?
Nope.
I know I did.
Nope. Yeah, it was one of those things too where it's like, that's the thing too. You go through a season and you look at these teams and you're like, man, I don't know if their pitching can hold up. But at the end of the day, it's not even the pitching. It's not even the type of pitchers or the pitchers they got. It's how, it's the type of performances they have in October. It's like, it doesn't matter who it is. Like, they could get hot, and that's all that matters. Because some people will be like, oh, like, hey, this team has a chance to make it all the way, or I mean, I said with the Orioles, I was wrong, but I was like, I know, hey, if they make it to the World Series, I wouldn't be surprised if they're carried by the offense or Kyle Gibson has a great October. Like, I just wouldn't be surprised if that happened. Obviously, it didn't go down, but it's just one of those things too. Is like with Texas, I didn't think their bullpen was going to hold up, and guess what? It did. You know, he had great performances from Leclerc, and all those guys in there. Even Will Smith, who's won 3 straight World Series. So and even Aroldis Chapman held his own. I think everyone was kind of waiting for that Aroldis Chapman moment in the World Series. Didn't really happen. So it's good to see the way these teams are put together, and I think it was a testament to the game, and I think we're ready for next year for sure to see how things are going. But as we officially end the 2023 season, kind of one thing we do before we wrap up, wanted to get your guys' thoughts on what if there's one or maybe two storylines that you guys are particularly waiting to go down in the offseason. I mean, there's plenty of things to look out for. I mean, I'll go first. I mean, really, I want to see where Ohtani goes. Obviously, that's an easy one, right? And just obviously what happens with Juan Soto, that's another one just because it impacts the Cubs. But also just like, some of these front office moves, like I want to see what more the White Sox add. I want to see what other teams add. Is Theo Epstein going to come out of the woodwork somehow? Who knows, right? I doubt he is, but some teams are like, I want Theo. What other rules are going to be implemented for next year, Rob Manfred. But who knows? But we'll start with you, Gabe. Is there any storyline in particular, whether it be to the White Sox or whether it be just the rest of the league, that you're looking forward?
Well, I'm gonna definitely keep my eyes and ears open with all things White Sox. That's what I do. That's my main team here in the Chicago area. But outside of Chicago, I'm curious to see what are the Seattle Mariners going to do. It's been a lot of rumblings that they could be an ideal trade partner for the Baltimore Orioles. And we know with Teoscar Hernandez set to be a free agent, that the Orioles have a glutton of talented outfield prospects. Will they potentially put a guy like Logan Gilbert on the market to try and get a Heston Kjerstad or a Colton Cowser? That remains to be seen. If they don't want to take that route, will they seek to enter and become a major player in the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes? We know that the Mariners franchise was owned by Nintendo for many years and have had success with Japanese players such as Ichiro. Might Shohei Ohtani be the next face there? And if he is, that can make for an even more intriguing AL West with the reigning world champion Rangers residing in it alongside of an Astros ball club that is no longer going to be managed by Dusty Baker and is seeking to find a manager at this point in time. And it's a ball club that's gotten a little bit older. And, every great run must come to an end. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do, especially with a fan base that is sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they want to see a winner in the Emerald City.
100%. What about you, Miles? Anything you're looking forward to this offseason?
Yeah, man, those are some great points, and I think I'm curious to see what the Yankees are going to do after a very frustrating season. I think Yankees fans have reached their boiling point. Now, we all know that Yankees fans are very honest with their feelings, very outgoing, but they're also fiercely loyal to their team. And they're not. This is a fan base that is not accustomed to any sort of mediocre baseball, and you still got Aaron Judge in his prime. I'm curious, Garrett Cole as well. I'm curious as to what are their next moves going forward? How aggressive are they going to be in trying to land someone like Ohtani, someone like Soto as well? Because this isn't a team that rebuilds. They're like, either we compete every single year or die. that is literally who the Yankees are. So I'm very intrigued by this, because in my lifetime, I mean, we've had seasons where the Yankees haven't been in the playoffs, or they've been, mediocre, whatever the case may be. It's cool seeing this as an adult for me, kind of seeing the game from a different, more mature viewpoint. So I'm very curious when it comes to that. What are they going to do to combat their competitive division next year? I'm very curious about that. Also, are we going to make some tweaks to the rule changes? Mm-hmm. I don't know. And I don't. This is like if this is something as immediate going from, okay, this didn't work in 2023, we're going to tweak this in 2024. I don't know how that works within the between the players union and the general and whoever. Because I do have some opinions. I do have some opinions as little things that I think can be tweaked, that I think are kind of more fair for both sides. But aside from that, you know, I mean, hey, where's Belly gonna go? Where's Shohei gonna go? Yeah, I'm excited for next season, and I hope we have an episode reviewing the rule changes and how we all felt about it during 2023. Got a lot to say.
I wonder too if San Diego is gonna tear it all down, especially right. what has come out in the last 24 to 48 hours. We know Juan Soto is gone as a goose in San Diego. They got to revamp that farm system with somebody. And why not do it with an asset that hasn't signed a long-term extension there? You just signed Manny Machado to a long-term extension, but you're struggling for money. Are you thinking about putting him on the market? Because if you are, the offseason is going to be hot. I know it's not a blockbuster free agency class, but if that is one of the main stories at the winter meetings that the Padres are interested in trading Manny Machado, he's going to have a lot of suitors.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's that and the Yankees are, you know, like as Miles said, are going to be fascinating to see what they do, because I mean, there are two teams that, their fan bases are kind of at a point where they're just like, man, like they've done so much and yet they've gotten little results. And you know, the Yankees, I don't think I've ever seen them in this position before. That's why I find it so fascinating, because they seem very stubborn with what they're doing and how they're doing it, from not only the ownership side, but general manager side, like from all angles, very stubborn. And I think the Juan Soto thing is going to be telling because it'd be a great fit in Chicago too, but a great fit for the Yankees as well. So if they were to go out there and get Juan Soto, it would change the whole dynamic of that team. And I think that would put them in a great spot. But as we all know, they still have a lot more other holes to fill in, pitching wise and all that. So, it's going to be, as always, it's a stacked off season, even when you don't expect it to be. And we're going to be looking forward to it and definitely talking all about it here on the At Bat Podcast. So that's a good place to wrap things up for this episode of the At Bat Podcast, episode 73, presented by War Media. I want to thank Miles Porter, as always, for joining me, Gabe Wilkins. So, of course, you can listen on the State of the Gabe podcast as on exclusively on Spotify. I want to thank everyone for watching. Make sure to watch all our other content. You know, the Bears Den, that's in partnership with Sports Zone Chicago. Check out our Substack as well, and all that. So really appreciate everyone for watching. For Saul Rodriguez, everyone signing off.